We're going to do these poster parties. That's how we got a lot of the growth to happen.
Through poster parties. What's a poster party?
Poster party. The labs would make a poster about the different things that they had done to save resources, whatever their lab had decided was the thing to do.
Oh, okay.
And they would make a poster and they would be there. A lot of times people in the labs are pretty isolated and they're really interested, but they don't really have a way necessarily to find out what's going on down the hall or what's going on in other departments and other buildings. And so when we had these poster parties, so now there's lab people just standing there at the poster, which has something about their research, but then also about their green lab efforts. And people came in droves, and we gave them food, obviously.
Yeah.
And people come in droves to hear about this. And that's how we grew the program, really. It was through those poster parties. Yeah.
I love that. When Pam told me that, I realized she wasn't just building a sustainability program. She was building an adoption strategy. She matched the program she was building to the culture that she saw at MIT. This is a very competitive culture. It's data-driven. They really thrive on innovation. So she brought all those elements in when she was thinking about how do we do this in a way that people will actually want to participate. So as you're listening to this conversation, notice how Pam talks about what she did and how it evolved over time. Big climate action requires a team, and Pam's stories are a great example of how to keep the end user in mind and build a system that lives beyond you. And with that, please enjoy my conversation with Pam Greenley, a 30-year lab design veteran and the person who introduced MIT's Green Labs program.
My name is Pam Greenley. I worked on MIT's lab designs for over 30 years. I'm an industrial hygienist. I worked in the environmental health and safety office there. Towards the end of my career, I started a Green Labs program at MIT. And I'm a lab ventilation specialist. I teach in that. I do some consulting on that.
And so tell me about the moment that made you think we need a Green Labs program at MIT.
Yeah, I kind of had two things going on. One is I went to an international sustainable labs conference, and Alice in Paradise was given an award about her effort with Green Labs. That was the first time I'd really kind of heard of those.
And who is she?
She started mygreenlabs.org.
Okay.
She's an entrepreneur. She had been working in laboratories. She was I believe her field of study was neuroscience.
Okay.
And she saw a lot of the waste that happens there and a lot of the resource intensiveness that the labs are all about from many perspectives, and wanted to do something about that. So there was that influence from her. I had been working in the area of energy conservation for laboratories because of my expertise around fume hoods and laboratory ventilation, which are very resource intensive, take a lot of energy. And I had been working on projects at MIT, but it seemed to be moving slowly. I felt that more engagement with the researchers would be effective and that we should try that approach. And so it was kind of that interest that I had in working closer with them and seeing what we could kind of do, somewhat with facilities, but also just what the labs could kind of do on their own.
Okay. So at first it was more of a, let's try to do this from the outside, and you didn't see as much progress as you were looking for. So then you started thinking, like, how do we involve the people who are actually working in the lab?
Yeah. When we would work on new laboratory buildings at MIT, we could do some great things around energy conservation and green efforts. But we had a lot of older labs, MIT's got laboratories of all ages. I really wanted to try to see what we could do with some of our existing laboratories. Renovating an old house can be a lot more difficult than building a new one.
Right.
And since I lived in an old house, I knew that was true, but I felt like there was things that we could do. And I knew that the research scientists obviously had a lot of concerns about climate change, and I think they'd be interested in that kind of program.
And so when you first started it, what felt the hardest? Was it culture or compliance or like the mechanics of what, things working in the lab?
Some folks were saying, particularly in my own office, the Environment, Health, and Safety office, and some of the other groups were like, the researchers they're too busy. I don't think they're going to spend time on this. I don't think they're going to want to spend time on this, So I had some of that for sure, But I said, well, I think we should give it a try.
Okay.
They had hired a director of sustainability at MIT. I don't know if that was 3 or 4 years before I started my work on Green Labs, maybe. I could see that a lot of their focus wasn't gonna be so much in the laboratories, but that they definitely wanted to support the work, so I felt the time was right.
Yeah, some good alignment.
Yeah.
How long ago did you start Green Labs at
Probably
MIT?
about 2016, I think we started.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you worked on it until you left?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
2018. Mhm.
So how did you actually go about launching it? What were the first, like, 2 to 3 steps?
Well, I remember I worked in my office was in a building, N52, on the edge of campus, but we had some really interesting people in there. There was a group, D Labs, they did, work in developing technologies in the developing world, getting
Hmm,
MIT students, particularly undergrads, get them into other countries and seeing how the rest of the world lived and what could we do from them with developing simple technologies that worked for their culture. And they ran a lot of contests. And there were also a lot of contests around MIT all the time, usually.
oh,
I
really?
I
Okay.
remember I was standing down on the first floor waiting for the elevator, and I saw an ad for a contest, and I thought, "Oh, that's how we should really start the Green Labs program.
Mm.
We should do it as a contest." And that's when I came up with the idea that we would do 2 things: which lab has the most resources saved, and
Okay.
what lab can come up with the most innovative idea for, and it was really that innovation award that I was really interested in because that was very part and parcel of MIT.
Okay, so it sounds like MIT is a pretty, competitive culture, like, they liked contests
Yeah,
and that was pretty motivating.
yeah.
And so then it's how much energy or resources saved?
When I talk about resources, we use that word resources because, like, I had originally worked mostly in the area of energy conservation, but the thing I liked about Green
Mhm.
Labs, it was really everything.
Ah,
Water conservation, energy conservation, minimizing waste, looking at your supply chain for both your materials, your consumables, but also for the equipment that you buy. When that kind of equipment was just starting to come online then. Now there's a little bit more robust program for researchers to figure out which kinds of equipment are the most energy efficient, but back then there wasn't a whole lot of that data. I like that idea that it was holistic, I used to call it. It's a holistic
yeah.
approach to resource conservation. It's not just about energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that idea about it.
Were you able to take baseline measurements, or how do you know how much they're actually saving?
I put together a Green Labs team.
Okay.
I was lucky enough that one of the people on that team from facilities, he knew everything about the costs in terms of CO2 emissions for all of the different resources that we were looking at.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he was able to put metrics around that. So if people say, "Oh, we saved this many kilowatts," we would know what that meant in terms of CO2 emissions reduction, amount of water saved. We could transfer everything into both dollars and tons of CO2.
And did you do that for all the labs across MIT, at year 1?
No, what we did is we did a big, for me anyway, marketing and education campaign. So marketing, we were
Uh-huh.
lucky enough to have an organizational structure through the EHS office where I worked, where we had a person in each department called an EHS coordinator, and we would meet with them regularly. And then they would talk more directly to the labs. They had, day-to-day contact with their laboratories in their own department. I told them what we were doing, how we are gonna do the contest, here's how it was gonna work. And so that helped a lot with the marketing and in terms of getting the
Okay.
word out. And so that we wanted labs to sign up. The labs had to get involved in what's called a Green Lab certification program. And Alice in
Mm.
Paradise that I mentioned helped us get started on that. We hired her to help us get started on that process.
And so in those early days, who were your allies across these, did you mentioned your
Yeah, the people on that team, I mean, Alice in
yeah.
Paradise was great because she was really teaching us how to do a Green Lab certification program. We weren't just about the
Uh-huh.
contest, we were also, we had to have a way to measure things, and her Excel spreadsheets and all the questions, she had put together a series of questions that labs would answer about what they were doing now and then what they were doing in 6 months so we could see, we could quantify the amount of resources saved.
Oh, very cool.
And so labs signed up. I mean, we weren't sure if we'd get anybody, really, but we did. I think we had 12 laboratories that we worked very closely with in the program.
Cool. Out of, like, about how many?
There's probably about 500. So it's a small number.
Wow.
It was a good size for us to start with.
Sure. Yeah.
It was manageable.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's a contest to reduce the amount of resources used. What happened with the innovation side?
So we were really lucky. Dan Preston, he was in the mechanical engineering department. He was just about finishing up his PhD, and he came up with this idea to do the LEAC, he called it, the Lab Energy Assessment Center. And the idea was to get undergrads involved in going into the laboratories and measuring the amount of energy used, and then with some changes, the amount of energy saved. There was quite a bit of technology involved. He realized right away that using the building management systems to figure out about how much energy a lab was using. So he came up with an integrated way of them going into a lab and putting monitors on all the different lab equipment that was there to figure out how much energy they were consuming, and then showing the lab people, oh, if you leave it on all the time, this is the amount of energy used. That LEAC approach of being able to show them, here's what that piece of equipment's using right now, and if you can turn it off at night, or maybe turn it down, or maybe turn it off, whatever works for that particular case, here's how much you can save, really did a lot to educate people about changes they could make.
And I love the fact that you're bringing in undergraduates because it gets them thinking about, the consumption of these resources. I'm sure they brought that into whatever they ended up doing for their graduate.
Undergrads are all about trying to get into a research lab at MIT. I mean, anything they can do to kind of see, what's that look like in there? Who's in there? What are they doing? And he actually had funding for it. So through our program.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Okay.
He used the contest money. Any money that labs won through any Green Labs effort, the money had to be spent on green efforts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was part of the deal. The facilities department was interested enough that they funded a full-time position for somebody to manage that.
What is it like in a lab? I've never been in a lab, especially at MIT.
Yeah, it really depends a lot on the PI, the principal investigator.
Okay.
They really set the tone. Obviously, a lot of the labs that we had involved, they were really great PIs. I mean, they were PIs that ran a laboratory where new ideas and free-form ideas were very welcomed. You'd think that's the case in every lab, and every research lab, but not necessarily, And good communication, they're really like a family. I mean, they're spending a lot of time together.
Yeah.
A lot of that does come right down through the PI.
And it makes sense that those were the first ones to sign up for this this new contest as well.
Progressive, younger, maybe it's tied in a little bit with their research, although not necessarily. I mean, one of the things that I was also excited about, a lot of the Green Labs programs that were happening at other places were really in the labs with the biological sciences research, because that's a big part of the research in this country. But MIT's got a very diverse array of research areas, and we were able to pull people from many different kinds of laboratories, material science, chemical engineering. That was very different from what you saw going on in a lot of the other Green Labs programs. So I was really excited about that we crossed quite a few different departments.
And so for those researchers who maybe, the PI doesn't set the tone of a high communication, maybe like in sync lab, what kind of cracked the isolation for them to show up and care and join Green Labs, or did they ever?
That was the reason why we did the educational component, because we felt if we could educate people in the labs who are interested, then they could do a better job of convincing their PIs that this was worth spending time on. I mean, that's really the critical thing. That was the best way I knew to get at it. Let's to teach them about their autoclave. And, an autoclave is something that you use to sterilize equipment. They knew how to use it in terms of their day-to-day work. It's kind of like your dishwasher, you know how to turn it on, but you really know how it works. And so we could educate on a more in-depth level so that they could understand ways to do the in this case, energy or water conservation.
And what would you say were some other hurdles in convincing researchers or leadership to take this seriously?
Some other hurdles. Well, I think probably some of it came from my own office. One of the things that chemical engineering was really interested in doing, in fact, the head of the department really funded it, which was great, was for glove recycling, nitrile gloves. A lot of people, they go through so many gloves. And many of them are uncontaminated, and those are the ones that were easy to decide we would include in the program. And what you do is they get picked up and they get turned into what's called plastic lumber. Like Adirondack chairs you've seen made out of plastic.
Yeah,
we have them here in New England a lot. I'm hoping you have them in California too.
Yeah.
But where do you draw the line about contamination? What labs are going to be allowed to be involved in that program. These were my colleagues in my office in the biosafety program. I tried to get them involved to really try to help us make that decision correctly and communicate it.
Yeah.
They do a very good job working with each labs. They really know the risk level in each lab and a lot of the practices in each lab, and so we could determine that way who could be part of the program or not. But initially, there was some resistance to that.
How do you balance the safety and compliance with the sustainability goals?
It's the hardest part to walk. I mean, it was why I was really interested in the program. I'd always kind of done this balancing act with, in the case of fume hoods, making sure they're protecting people like they should be, but not overdoing it and wasting energy as a result. And this Green Labs has that all through it in every one of these areas that we were trying to do research conservation. So the best way to it is really through education and really it's the devil's in the details. That's the problem. You can't make some kind of like blanket statements and it's going to work everywhere. You kind of have to dig down in. You got to do your homework. You got to go down into the details a little bit to try to figure out where you can draw the line.
Was there any pushback because people thought it might like disrupt science or take too much time to go through these efforts, or was that not?
Sure. I mean, I tend to not remember that very much because I ignored that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always like, hey, I think this is going to work, and we're going to keep going until we prove it. And it did work pretty successfully, very successfully. I felt with the limited time that we had and the limited resources that we had. I don't know. I guess I ignored the negativity. I'm just like, hey, we can work.
I like it.
I mean,
optimist. Yes. Yeah, we can work through anything. So you said it was like super successful from your eyes. Can you help us understand how it grew or what kind of impact it was made?
Yeah, I mean, we tried to make it a fun thing, getting people together. We did these posters. People in labs are used to doing poster displays when they go to conferences about their research. And so I said, well, we're going to use the same theme here. We're going to do these poster parties, and the Green labs are going to do their poster and tell their story. And I forgot about that until just now. That's how we got a lot of the growth to happen. We would, set up
through poster parties. What's a poster party?
Poster party is we would go to a lobby and we had a couple of really nice buildings at MIT that were perfect for this. The labs would make a poster about the different things that they had done to save resources, whatever their lab had decided was the thing to do. And they would make a poster and they would be there. And so one of the things that I also learned, and I mean, I kind of knew this, but I think Green Labs really emphasized it for me, is a lot of times people in the labs are pretty isolated. And they're really interested, but they don't really have a way necessarily to find out what's going on down the hall or what's going on in other departments and other buildings. And so when we had these poster parties, so now there's lab people just standing there at the poster, which has something about their research, but then also about their Green Lab efforts. And we gave them food, obviously.
Yeah.
And people come in droves to hear about this. And that's how we grew the program, really. It was through those poster parties. Yeah.
I love that. Okay.
Offering money if you green your lab and offering posters, parties, very simple stuff. But I found out there weren't a lot of avenues for researchers to learn about other labs.
Okay. So you have the structure from Green Labs, and then you're combining it with the culture at MIT, it sounds like. Like you found this opportunity with contests. You knew that would resonate with the students and faculty there.
Right.
Cash prize, even better.
Yeah.
Educational efforts so they understand what's going on and why this is important.
Yeah.
And then the poster parties, which lets them show off their work, but also an opportunity to socialize and mingle among each other, which they don't really normally get the opportunity to do.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So kind of creating the right environment to make this thrive.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
I mean, you have to make it fun for people. It's extra work kind of that they're taking on. So we wanted it to be, it is work, but making it as enjoyable as we could. And definitely, obviously, people would have a feel-good sense about it. I mean, the people who did the glove recycling, there were 3 or 4 people in the chemical engineering department, and they just ran with that thing, and they loved it. I mean, I have pictures of them with the big smiles on their faces, showing all the gloves that they were able to send, that they didn't send to an incinerator, but rather, were able to put into recyclable materials. I mean, that's the easy thing about Green Labs for people who do it. It feels good, right? They want to do recycling. They understand how serious climate change is, and they want to do whatever they can. They understand how resource intensive the labs are, and they really want to try to do a better job with that. Ours was really kind of grassroots. I mean, I think if you go into big pharma, they're doing a lot, and a lot of it's coming out of the corporate, which is great.
Mm.
Ours was
Mhm.
not really. Ours was more kind of grassroots and growing up.
Hey,
Yes.
you gotta start somewhere, which is
Yes.
good. I mean, you can get a lot of momentum that way.
And then once we kinda got it rolling and showed that, "Oh, yeah, people are interested in this," then it was able to be supported more from top down.
And thinking back, is there a story that you might recall around a skeptic who eventually came around?
It was happening, the researchers hid it from me. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't
Okay.
talk about it. They didn't try to, like, shine a bright
Uh,
light on it. They went around it, you know, so Mhm.
Could researchers participate in this without their PI being on board?
I might have sensed a little bit of that. We had one department there might have been some concern on the part of that PI, but the lab manager who ran the lab, she was really good, and I remember her talking a little bit about that to me. She was able to convince him that this was time
Mm.
well
I
spent.
think that's really good for listeners to hear too. So you don't have to be in the leadership position. You know, if your leader might be a little skeptical or really not on board, there's still opportunity to make shifts.
Yeah.
What arguments would you say landed best with leadership? Was it around cost savings, reputation, student interest?
When they saw the success that we did get quite a few labs involved, and it was a pretty broad spectrum across, many departments, I think they were like, "Oh, wow, I guess people are willing to work on this." So, I think thinking that adoption and the team that I put together, which was, people from many different aspects of the university, seeing how, effective that team could be to work together, I think those things all really helped.
Who was part of that team? What roles or
I
departments?
had, facilities was in there, I had recycling. Recycling is a lot of how people in green labs wanna start. They see all the plastic waste that happens, and that's something that they can really do a lot to a large extent on their own in terms of some easy changes, and so but we really
Mm,
had to work with her, the recycling department to make sure that would work okay. 2 or 3 people from my EHS office, so again, those biosafety people that I talked about, I had one of them on the team because I knew we needed to bring them along
okay.
with us, and then I had a few of the I've talked about these EHS coordinators that are out in the departments, and there was a couple of them that I picked who were very enthusiastic about this program, and they were on the team too, so that they could really represent the research side. And I had a couple researchers now that I think of it, that's right, there was one woman out of one of the labs who had done a lot of this work out in California, actually, in her lab there, and she
Hmm.
wanted to see it continue at her MIT lab, so she was really
Oh,
effective on
cool.
the team. Yeah,
EHS and environmental health and safety?
yeah, that's what EHS is, yeah.
Cool. And when you say this was all part of the team, I'm guessing they didn't change roles to join a centralized function. This was
No,
like in their spare time to help push this effort forward.
it was a Green Labs
Yeah,
team. Yeah. And,
cool.
we met every 2 weeks because I was like, "We can't meet every week because we all had other we had full-time jobs we were already
Yeah.
doing. We're gonna meet every other week till we
Hmm.
get this thing off the ground," and, that's what we did, and people really worked together to make it happen.
Wow.
I had a long career there, and I did a lot of cool things, I built labs in Singapore, I did all kinds of different things, but the Green Labs thing, loved it.
Oh, I love hearing that.
Yeah.
And if somebody is listening and they work in a
Yeah.
lab or around labs and wanted to start tomorrow, what do you think are some of the easiest first
Well,
wins?
now there's a pretty good infrastructure for the Green Lab work
Hmm.
compared to when we were starting. There's companies out there who are really helping, particularly like with the plastics recycling, and they have it at lots of different support levels. So there is some structure out
What
there.
do you mean by support levels?
Well, for the company I'm thinking of, one level is they'll actually come into your lab and pick it up.
Okay.
Another is, you have a more centralized location and they'll do pickups that way. So it costs different amounts of money for the plastics recycling, depending
Uh-huh.
on what level you engage in. But the other thing that they sell, which is really good, is they give you the metrics
Mm,
you've saved. Because, in a lot of cases, whether that's at the corporate or whatever level, the metrics really have to go with it. People really want to know what's the cost savings and what's the tons of CO2 emitted reductions that are happening
mhm.
results of the work. I know for me anyway, taking the metrics load off, that's a great idea. When I hear about things, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Great."
Do the glove recycling, does that end up being a cost saving, or are you paying this company to recycle and then
It's not so much a cost saving as it is just, making sure we don't It's a CO2 emissions reduction more than it is
Right.
cost
Okay.
savings, yeah.
Right, which is important for companies to track
Yeah.
in general if they care about this.
Ours was going into plastic lumber, but now I think there's programs where they're getting made into gloves again. So, and
Hmm,
I know some of the plastics
cool.
recycling companies that I've been looking at for the Green Labs program I'm working on for the course, they put it back into the products that you can buy from them.
Oh, that's great.
There's companies that have these buyback programs, rather than using styrofoam is really difficult. You can't recycle it. Puts a lot of pollutants out in the air when you make it. So, styrofoam is another one to either switch away from that for particularly biological materials that are being shipped to keep things cold,
Mm,
or they'll have a take back program. The company, if you buy that
okay.
product from them, they have a buyback program.
Oh,
So
good.
there's a little more
Okay.
infrastructure now around a lot of the Green Labs efforts than there was back then.
Do you have an example of maybe a small pilot that then turned into something that was campus wide?
Well, I think the LEAC, the lab energy assessment work, after I left, and there's a full-time person that was working on that, was offered to lots of labs so that they could see what their energy use was. We called it the turn it off, turn it down program.
Turn it off, turn it down.
That's
I
really
like it.
that's really what it's all about. Turn it off and turn it down. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Just like
so simple, but that's great.
Yeah,
That's
just like
great.
your home. I mean, I always use that home analogy. Researchers, obviously, a lot of us, we're doing a lot at home to try to recycle, reduce energy use, reduce waste. And, people in the labs want to do that too in their labs. Since that's basically like their home because they're there all the time.
Do you have any stats around impact that you recall? Or to give a sense of how much energy usage is spent through these fume hoods or in labs in general?
Well, yeah, a typical thing that we talk about is a fume hood that's left on all year with a fully open sash. It uses about the same amount of energy as 3.5 homes per year.
Wow.
Yeah. They are the energy hogs. That's what I worked on a lot was lab ventilation. That was my main focus through a lot of my career, and they're the elephant in the room when it comes to lab energy conservation. You've got to get a handle on
Mm.
those.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a simple place to start too if people
Mhm.
work in or around labs.
Yeah.
And tell me, how do you know Jacob?
He worked for some architecture firms that were designing labs at MIT, and he would be working a lot on the sustainability issues around those new labs. It was great to work with somebody who's that much of an expert and find out because there's a lot of new technologies coming online all the time around how to do energy conservation with fume hoods, whether it's automatic sash
Oh,
closures, when nobody's at the hood, reducing exhaust rates, different things that you can do to save energy.
is there a story from your time working on green labs at MIT that still makes you smile when you think about it?
Oh, that's a good question. Makes me smile because I enjoyed it a lot, as you can tell.
Yeah, I can see it really lights you up.
Yeah, I guess probably when I read Dan Preston's proposal for the LEAC, other people submitted ideas and those were great, but this one was like head and shoulders above everything else in terms of, how integrated, particularly that year up education, energy savings. I love that. That probably made me really happy because I knew we weren't going to have any argument anywhere about who should win that prize.
And what do you hope that people carry forward from your work?
That, sometimes you have to take a little risk. You have to push a little bit. You got to be a little pushy
Hmm.
in a nice way, maybe, depending on the culture where you're from. In my case, I had a sense that the research scientists would be behind this. So it's kind of like go with your gut, you know? And even when I moved over to Draper, which is really part of the military industrial complex, which MIT is too, but Draper is even more. That's where I spent my last few years of work. They were ripe for it too. They wanted to do it too. I mean, I went to the executives there and I said, they hired mostly engineers over there. It's an engineering R&D outfit. And I said, they want to know that they're working for a place with good values, and this is part of it. Sustainability and environmental work is part of it. And so I did Earth Day programs over there, and people loved it.
Really?
Well, what I found out is that even though it wasn't the core work at Draper, there were environmental related projects. And so I did that whole poster idea again. I was like, okay, everybody who's working on an environmental project at Draper, put together a poster and we want you here on Earth Day. And they came and people loved it.
Wow. Okay.
Hey,
Poster party 2 for 2. I love it.
that's right. Another poster party. Yeah.
And what about the other pieces? Did you integrate anything else from MIT at Draper?
The vice president, she gave us money so we gave out, like bamboo cutlery,
Okay.
different little giveaways,
Mhm.
So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's an easy thing to sell, right? Everybody wants to be good to the
Yeah.
planet, so yeah.
Yeah. People want to do good. They just need to know how to start.
That's right.
So if you can help provide that.
You just kind of have to put your toe in the water and just keep walking forward, and you get other people who are like, "Oh, yeah, this is a good idea. This is worth spending time on."
And Pam, if people want to follow your work or get in touch with you, where can they reach you?
The best way is Greenley, Greenley at MIT.edu.
That was my conversation with Pam Greenley. What stood out to me was that while action can start with just a single person, the impact that you're looking to drive is going to require the whole team. And that's done by knowing your users and by building it into the business processes that already exist. This way, your impact can stay long after you leave. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you the most? What kind of culture are you working in? I read every single comment, and I'm available if you want to reach out on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're looking to hear stories about people transitioning into climate, check out Climate Swings wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.